Alrighty, welcome everybody to a new series we're going to be doing here on the channel where I'm going to be going division by division, team by team, and pick by pick to hand out my draft grades following the 2023 NFL Draft. We're going to be starting out with the NFC North today. As I am a Chicago Bears fan, I found that pretty fitting. We're going to go through each pick these teams made. I'm going to hand out a grade for each pick. And I'm going to hand out a grade for each team as a whole. Hey, real quick, as a side note, I just want to make it known that all of these draft grades in reality should be incomplete. Just because we don't know what these players are really going to be until they step onto the field. So these are just my first thoughts, first reaction grades, and these can obviously change years and years down the line. So just keep that in mind. I know that goes without saying, but there's some people out there that lack the common sense to, have that unspoken rule there. So I figured I'd throw that in here. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed the video. And like I'm about to say, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff, because it helps the channel out a lot. So before we jump into this, make sure to leave a like down below and leave a comment as well telling me what your favorite pick was from each of these four teams, being the Bears, Lions, Packers, and Vikings. And also before we jump into this, I probably should put a little bit of a disclaimer here that I am currently battling some sort of sickness. I'm like 95% sure it's COVID. I don't know for a fact because I haven't gotten tested, but I've got all the symptoms, so it's probably COVID. But we're, running on a few ibuprofen right now. Got me feeling pretty decent, I guess is the best way to put it. So hopefully that'll help us out today. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump into this, starting out with the Detroit Lions. All right, so starting out with the Detroit Lions, on one hand, I really respect Brad Holmes deciding that positional value does not matter. But on the other hand, positional value does matter, and taking a running back and a linebacker with your first two picks, both of which were in the first round, is not a great draft strategy. Just going pick by pick here, starting out with the Jahmyr Gibbs pick, I'm not a fan. I'm just going to tell you straight up, I am not a fan of this move at all. You're sitting at pick 6, you could have had a guy like Jalen Carter, you could have had a guy like Christian Gonzalez, you could have had, like, good talent, you could have even added, Tyree Wilson, who was one of my favorite players in the class. But you decide to trade down, which could have worked. And Christian Gonzalez falls right into your lap at 12. You're sitting there with a big need at corner, and instead you pass on Gonzalez, who, again, in my opinion, is a blue chip corner prospect, for Jahmyr Gibbs, who is a running back that can't be a legit 3-down back for your offense. Like, sure, dynamic playmaker, really good pass catcher. I see why you'd want Jahmyr Gibbs on your team, but taking him at pick 12 is nuts. And not only that, but if you really wanted a running back in the first round, you could have taken Bijan at 6. Bijan was the only running back in this draft class worth a top 25 pick. Jahmyr Gibbs is good, and I think he's going to be good for the Lions. But like I said, he can't be a 3-down back. You don't take a back that can't be a 3-down guy in the first round. That's just bad process. Now, if, Gibbs is there in the early second round, or even if you want to trade up in the second round for Gibbs, I totally understand it. That would have been a fine pick. But taking him at 12, with the other talent on the board, hell, even a guy like Kalijah Kancey's still there, I just don't see it. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And because of that, I got to give this Gibbs pick a D grade. I just don't get it. Like, Gibbs is going to be good for the Lions, don't get me wrong. It's just, with the positional value and the other guys on the board, it's just not a great pick. And then we move on to pick 18 with Jack Campbell, who in my opinion is the best off-ball linebacker in this class. And I actually like this pick. This is another pick that's gotten a lot of crap, and I get why it has, because it's an off-ball linebacker in the first round in 2023. But given how bad this linebacker class was, Campbell stands, like, far and away as the best linebacker of the group, so I understand taking him a little bit high. I don't love the pick. This isn't like a home run, but you're getting a legit dude at off-ball linebacker. Like, this is a B grade for me. I like Campbell a lot. He's going to be good for the Lions. Obviously, you have the fun Dane Campbell, Jack Campbell, last name connection there. And Campbell's a damn good ball player. Like I said, again, the positional value isn't great, but I don't hate it nearly as much as I hate the Gibbs pick. And then we go to the Lions' third pick in this draft, which is Sam Laporta. And this is another pick I really do not like. Sam Laporta is not a great tight end. I want to say he had like a 15% drop percentage or something of that nature in his final season at Iowa, and you can make excuses for him. He had a bad quarterback. I don't care. 15% drop percentage is not excusable by, oh, they have a bad quarterback. That's just bad tight end play. Hey, editor MillerFootball here. I just wanted to pop in and say I was a little off on Laporta's drop rate. It was actually a 9.4%. I don't know where the hell I got 15% from. That's totally my bad. 9.4 is still not great. Like, I still don't think Laporta has, reliable hands, but, I got to get my numbers right. So, my apologies on that. And I also forgot to throw out there that I don't like Laporta as, like, a contested catcher because his contested catch rate in college is under 40%. So just keep that in mind when I give out the grade I'm about to give, because that is also far from perfect, far from ideal for a tight end that you're taking in the second round. The dude can't block either. So you've got a tight end that can't block, that can't really catch consistently. Sure, he's a good athlete. Sure, he, is a solid route runner. But Michael Mayer was on the board. Michael Mayer is the best tight end in this draft class. And, maybe the NFL doesn't agree with that, but I don't care. These are my grades. So taking Laporta, not only 3 picks into the second round, but over Michael Mayer is just, again, not a good draft pick in my opinion. I don't hate it as much as the Gibbs pick. This gets a C- from me. But there were other tight ends on the board, 2 of which we'll be getting into here in a few minutes when we talk about the Packers, that were better than Laporta. And now, to all the Lions fans out there, we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to be positive. We're going to talk about Brian Branch because this was a home run pick. Pick 45, you get a top 10 player in the class. I think I had him at 7 on my big board. You get a super dynamic, versatile chess piece that can come in and play multiple different roles for you. He could be your starting safety next to Kirby Joseph. He could be your nickel corner. You can play him up in the box kind of as like a pseudo linebacker. There's so many things you can do with Brian Branch in your defense that getting him at pick 45 in the second round is absurd value. This is an A+. You hit this pick out of the park. And I know I've seen Lions fans try to do the mental gymnastics. It's like, well, if you switch the Branch pick and the Gibbs pick, it doesn't look as bad. Like, yeah, sure, but that's not how the draft works. You can't just switch around picks to make the value for them look better. You got lucky that Branch fell into your laps at 45, but that doesn't take away from the fact that that's a home run pick. Absolutely love the Branch pick for the Lions. And then we get to pick 68 in the third round, and that's quarterback Hendon Hooker, who, again, don't love this pick. Hendon Hooker is not only not that good of a draft prospect, but he's coming off a torn ACL. He's already 25, and he needs development as a quarterback. You're taking on a developmental QB that is 25 when Jared Goff is, 27, 28? Like, your developmental quarterback is 3 years younger than your quarterback that's been in the league for 7 years. That is rough. I was going to give a bad grade to anybody who drafted Hendon Hooker. I do not get the hype with him. I don't get the excitement with him. This is a C. For me, with Hendon Hooker, this is definitely a C. And then we go to Broderick Martin, who I don't have as much to say. He's a developmental nose tackle pick, high upside, high athleticism. It gets a B- from me. I think it was a little early for him, but I understand the thought process. I like Martin. Again, I think you're just taking him a little early here at pick 96. And then going to Colby Swordstall here, I'm going to be honest, I'm not familiar with him. He went to William & Mary, and I can't say I was watching a lot of William & Mary film during the offseason. So I'm not going to give a grade to him because I feel like it would be unfair to assign a grade for a player I'm not familiar with. Maybe he's good, maybe he's not, I don't know. And finally, in the 7th round at pick 219, they took Antoine Green from my North Carolina Tar Heels. And this is a pick I like a lot. I think getting him in the 7th round is really good value. He stepped into the kind of De'Ami Brown role at North Carolina last year. Good speed, good size, good overall athlete, good route runner. You just lost DJ Chark in free agency, and you're going to be without Jameson Williams for the first half of the year. and your wide receiver room just doesn't have any depth. So adding a guy like Antoine Green, who I think has the upside of being a pretty damn solid third receiver in your offense, is a really good pick in the 7th round. So overall, the Lions draft class, like I said, is kind of conflicting for me because I like guys like Campbell and Branch and Green, but I also really don't like guys like Laporta and Hooker. And then I like Gibbs, but I don't like where they drafted him. So as a whole, despite the lower grade on some of these picks, I think as a whole, if you're just looking at the pool of players they pulled together, this is a B-. This is like borderline C+, but a B-. Guys like Gibbs and Campbell and Branch and potentially Martin and Green are going to be impactful players for the Lions. Laporta, I got to see more out of before I'm ready to say anything super positive about him. Hooker, I don't know what you're doing there. And like I said, Swordstall. I apologize. Excuse me if I mispronounced his name. I can't really say anything about. But as a whole, like, you got some talented ball players here. I can't be too upset with the Lions. It's just taking some of the guys when they did is a little questionable. Moving over to the Green Bay Packers and a much bigger draft class. It pains me to say this. We're going to be a hell of a lot more positive here. Starting out with Lucas Van Ness at pick 13. I love Van Ness. He's one of my favorite players in this draft class. I believe he was my edge 4. So getting him at pick 13 is pretty good value. The only guy I had higher than him at his position was Nolan Smith at this point. And obviously with Nolan Smith's size, I get wanting to pass on him. So you have the Packers taking on a guy who's a bit of a developmental guy. Really, really good first step. Really, really good speed to power. Just overall a powerful dude. Has the tools to be a really good run defender. He just needs that refinement. And we've seen Green Bay take on players like this before. If Rashawn Gary rings a bell, it was a pretty similar situation. Granted, they didn't draft him at pick 13, but we already know the Packers have the capability of taking a guy like this and turning him into something nasty. So, it wouldn't shock me if in 2 to 3 years you have Rashawn Gary and Van Ness as one of the best edge duos in football. Or if that doesn't work out for Van Ness, you tell him to put on a little bit of weight and he can play inside. Like, there's a lot you can do with this guy. I think you've got not only a superstar athlete, or not a superstar athlete, excuse me, a really good athlete that has superstar potential, but also an A-plus character guy. So in my opinion, this is an A grade. Again, as much as I hate to say it, really, really good draft pick there. And they just kept rolling into the second round. Really went hard into pass catchers in the second round, which is obviously huge. They have Jordan Love with very little around him, so they tried to address that as much as possible. Starting out at tight end, which was by far their biggest need on offense, given the fact that Josiah DeGuara was their starting tight end going into the draft, and he's a fullback. Much love to fullbacks, but DeGuara should not be your number 1 tight end. So they go out and get Luke Musgrave, who's, another guy that's a bit of a developmental guy, but the athletic tools are absolutely nuts. He has better hands than a guy like Sam Laporta. And he's not a fantastic blocker, but he at least tries there, and he's probably going to be playing more of like a wing role. Think kind of what Alan Lazard was doing for Green Bay, where he's lining up as your move tight end quite a bit. Just somebody that can get out in space, move, runs good routes, good athlete, all that good stuff. Just, if we want to be real, a better Sam Laporta. So definitely can't go wrong there. And then we move on to Jaden Reed at pick 50, and you get yourself a really nice deep threat. A guy who, is capable of beating press, both by getting a little physical and also just thanks to some really nasty release packages. He reminds me a lot of Tyler Lockett because of that, and mixed with his phenomenal ball tracking ability. So again, getting your young quarterback a weapon, can't go wrong there. Forgot to give my grade for Musgrave, but Musgrave and Reed, much like Van Ness, are getting an A grade from me. Both fantastic picks. And then we doubled down on tight end in the 3rd round with Tucker Kraft. And I know a lot of people are probably looking at this like, oh, why are you taking 2 tight ends? Why would you double down like that early on? Well, Green Bay runs a good bit of 12 personnel. Probably about 15 to 20% of their offense is going to be ran out of 12 personnel. Like I said, if you have Musgrave, who's going to be more of your move tight end, Kraft is your ideal inline tight end. So if you're going to line up Musgrave in like the slot or, off the line of scrimmage, then you can keep Kraft closer to the line of scrimmage. He's a really good run blocker. Not as good of an athlete, not as good of a route runner, but he's got that power. He's got that strength. To be totally honest, he reminds me a lot of Cole Kmet, kind of like a poor man's Cole Kmet. I know that doesn't sound great to a lot of people, but to me, that's pretty high praise because I think Cole Kmet is outstanding. Maybe outstanding's being a little generous. I think he's a top 10 tight end. So getting a guy who's going to be impactful day one in the 3rd round pairs very nicely with Musgrave. They complement each other very well. Again, getting another A from me, and that's 4 picks in a row for Green Bay that are getting an A grade. And again, as a Bears fan, shakes me to my core that Brian Gutekunst started out the draft that well. But moving on to these next 2 picks, not as big of a fan, starting out with Colby Wooden out of Auburn. Not a guy I was a super big fan of. I think taking him in the 4th round is a bit of a reach. I definitely wouldn't have taken him this early. He's just kind of an awkward tweener that doesn't really have much in terms of a pass rushing plan. He plays with high pad level. So if they're planning on kicking him inside, then maybe this can work out. But if they want to play him as an edge rusher, I just don't see it. So there's definitely something to be had there with Wooden. I don't think this is like a waste of a pick or anything. So I would say this is going to get a C- grade from me. Again, not a huge fan, but, there's definitely something there. They could see something that I don't as they're professionals and I'm not. And then moving on to the 5th round with quarterback Sean Clifford, this is throwing away a draft pick. This quarterback class outside of the top 4 guys was a big old bucket of mid. And Clifford, in my opinion, wasn't even one of the 10 best guys in this class. Like, I like him a little bit. I think I had a 7th round grade on Clifford. But he's not great. Sure, he beat out Will Levis. That's the big story, but I don't care. He's just kind of your run-of-the-mill average college quarterback that, like, the fan base is going to like, I think. I don't know a whole lot of Penn State fans. I could be wrong there. But he's a guy that, like, your fan base is going to like, but once he gets to the next level, he's probably not going to do much. So unless this is, like, some, chess, not checkers move by Green Bay and just bringing in a bad backup to ensure that Jordan Love has the job, and they're trying to show him that they have a ton of confidence in him, I just don't see the pick here. This is getting a D- for me. Not quite an F, because I like Clifford a little bit, but not a good pick. And then we move on to Dontavian Wicks, who, kind of like Wooden, I'm underwhelmed by, but I can see why the Packers would like him, and that's because he's a good run blocker as wide receiver. So I can see why they'd like him, but they passed on a lot of receivers that were better, in my opinion. At this point, guys like Parker Washington and Andre Isovas, I think I said his name right. I could have butchered that, but yeah, you probably know who I'm talking about. Or even Xavier Hutchinson, who I know a lot of my, TikTok friends are pretty high on. I wasn't a huge fan, but, like, I see the hype there. Either way, bunch of guys that were better than Wicks. So not a great pick, not the fastest guy in the world, without a doubt. But like I said, he's a good run blocker, and he's okay. It's not like he's terrible, but when you have a guy that's not a great athlete, doesn't have great hands, it's kind of tough. So this is a C- for me, just because I can see why Green Bay would like him, but I'm not a huge fan personally. Then we move on to Carl Brooks, who is quite literally just better Colby Wooden. Another tweener guy who's probably going to play defensive tackle. He's listed as a defensive tackle here on this website. So this is a good pick. I liked the double down strategy that Green Bay employed here at tight end and defensive tackle. Wide receiver, not quite as much, even though technically they triple down, but you get my point. I like the Brooks pick a good bit. So this gets a B from me. Definitely a good pick. And then we move on to Anders Carlson. Gonna be honest, I didn't watch a whole lot for kickers. I did put some on my draft board, but I'm not gonna act like I'm a kicker expert. So this is a B. Getting him right before the 7th round. You need a young kicker. I get it. It's good practice. And looking at their 7th round picks, I really, really like what Green Bay did here, starting out with Carrington Valentine. Not a guy that I'm a super huge fan of, but really good athlete, good size, definitely good value in the 7th round just to kind of take a flyer on a corner. Lou Nichols III, super, super productive in 2021. Again, not a guy that I'm like blown away by, but it's the 7th round. You know, you're just looking for value in any way, shape, or form. So another good pick there. Both of which get a B from me. I forgot to give my grade for Valentine there. And then Anthony Johnson Jr. is an interesting case because this is a guy who played 4 years of outside corner at Iowa State and then transitioned to more of a slot corner role, and now he's going to transition to safety in the NFL. But he's a super instinctive guy, really smart, good in coverage. And I'm going to be 100% honest, this is a guy that, because he fits so well in Green Bay's scheme and their position group is so bad, could be competing for a starting job, day one, like as a 7th round pick, which is crazy. Obviously they lost Adrian Amos, Darnell Savage is not good. So because of that, this gets an A from me. Like, Anthony Johnson's a really good developmental piece that could really, turn into something in Green Bay. And then finally with Grant DuBose, again, I'm not going to lie to you, this is a guy that I'm not super familiar with, so I'm not going to give him a grade. But as a whole, Green Bay really killed it. Brian Gutekunst kind of had a masterclass here. So as a whole, I'm giving this class an A. There were a lot of A grades handed out. We had 5 A grades handed out. 4 B grades. Sure, there were a couple stinkers, mainly with Clifford. But as a whole, this is a really, really good draft class. A handful of guys that are going to be impactful day one. A couple that have some upside long term. Like, you really can't get much better than this. And that's just really good. If it wasn't for guys like Wooden and Clifford, we could probably be close to calling this an A+ draft. There's a couple guys that are weighing it down, but as a whole, really, really good stuff by Green Bay. All right, moving over to the Minnesota Vikings and a much smaller draft class. This is a group that I think is fine. I think the Vikings did a fine job. I'm not blown away by what they did. There's definitely some picks I don't agree with, but I think they did fine overall. Starting at a pick 23 with Jordan Addison. I get it, wanting to add more firepower to your offense because you can never have too many weapons. There was a run on receivers. I get it, Jordan Addison's good. But Will Levis fell to you here. You want a quarterback that can develop behind Kirk for a year. That could have been a really good pick. You could have went defense. You also could have waited to take a wide receiver because the separation between a guy like Addison and then some of the day 2 guys and even someone like Josh Downs, who fell a lot, isn't that big in my opinion. Like, Jordan Addison was my wide receiver 5. I had a day 2 grade on him, a 2nd round grade more specifically. It's not a bad pick by any means. It's okay. Like I said, it's a fine pick. I'd give it a B. Not blown away by it, not super ecstatic thinking about him in Minnesota, but he's a good ball player, so I can't complain too much there. Moving on to Mekhi Blackmon. This is a pick that I think was a bit early. I think this was a little early for Blackmon. There were a lot of better man corners on the board, guys like Jalen Jones or Darius Rush or Eli Ricks. There were guys that I think are going to do what Blackmon's going to do better, but I trust Brian Flores. Brian Flores is a hell of a defensive mind. He must have seen something in Blackmon that I didn't. And again, like I said earlier, he's a professional. I'm not. So I don't want to question it too much just based off my own evaluations, and I'm not a huge fan of this pick. So I'm going to give it a C+. There's definitely upside there. Good athlete. It's just he's not very instinctive. He's not the stickiest corner. He's not good in zone, but that's not going to matter a whole lot for Minnesota because they're not going to be running a lot of zone coverage. So it kind of is what it is there. But as a whole, not the worst pick. Just I think there were better options there. All right, moving on to their day 3 pick, starting out with Jay Ward. He's a super, super fun defensive back, a guy that, his highlight reel is stupendous. Definitely a lot of fun plays. But you turn on the tape and he's a little aggressive, kind of like the Tasmanian devil out there, right? There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of fun stuff happening, but it's not contained. And obviously going to a defensive staff ran by Brian Flores is a good way to take a player and kind of hone their ability. So I think the discipline and things like that are going to come with Flores. And if that's the case, this dude has really high upside. I think he could even compete for a day one starting job at slot corner, or they can make him more of a developmental guy at safety. Kind of depends on what they're looking for from him. But overall, I think Ward is a really good pick. I think you just, like I said, need to kind of control all of that energy, all of that excitement. So as a whole, giving this a B+, good pick. Jacqueline Roy, another guy who kind of needs to work on his consistency. He's somebody that, you turn on one game and you're like, oh my god, this dude is an animal. And then you turn on the next game and his pad level's inconsistent, his hand placement's inconsistent, his motor's inconsistent, his drive's inconsistent. Like, he's a guy that has, again, good upside, and that's what you're looking for here in the 5th round, is a player with good upside. I think Roy, if he can work on that consistency and work on his motor a little bit, again, Brian Flores is a good guy if you like to kind of pull that out of a guy, but at the end of the day, you can't teach heart. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. I don't want to speculate, and I don't want to call a guy getting drafted into the NFL heartless or something like that, because obviously he made it this far. But there's definitely some consistency concerns at the very least with his motor. So we'll have to see where that goes. But I think, again, this is a B+ pick, another guy that's going to need a little bit of development, but can be good for them. And then we go to Jaron Hall, who was one of my favorite players in this draft. I really like Hall, among the quarterbacks in this class especially. He was my QB5 after the top 4. As I mentioned earlier, it was kind of a bucket of mid, but Hall was my favorite out of that bucket. So I hate that he's going to Minnesota. I wanted to see him go somewhere where I could root for him. Can't do that in Minnesota, sadly. But, super creative guy, good athlete, solid arms, solid solid accuracy. If it's not apparent by me almost bringing it up 3 times, he's a good athlete. But he's got size concerns. He's a little bit on the older side, obviously going to BYU. He had to serve his mission, so he's going to be a little bit older. There's concerns with his durability, so he's not like the perfect quarterback, but that being said, B+ pick for the Vikings. Not quite a developmental quarterback, but definitely someone I like more than some of his older contemporaries like Hendon Hooker, who we talked about earlier. And then finally we go to Dwayne McBride here in the 7th round, and this one is conflicting because McBride in the 7th round is really, really good value. But I also have a lot of issues with McBride. He's not a really athletic dude. His ball security is awful. There's no tape on him as a pass catcher, so we don't know what he adds there. But as an in-between the tackles runner, he's physical, low center of gravity, really good contact balance, really good vision. So, as a 7th round pick, good value, really good player there. I think he's somebody that, long-term could maybe replace Alexander Madison. When you get to that point, I know they just extended him, but obviously it's not like they gave him a long-term contract. So, as a complimentary back, a goal line back, a power back, I think McBride's a good pick. It's just that ball security really, really scares me. I'm wondering how that's going to hold up in the NFL, because if you're dropping the ball at UAB, I'm a little concerned with how you're going to fare in the NFL. But that being said, it's hard to give this anything lower than a B+. So all of the Vikings day 3 picks, I thought they did really well. B+ is across the board. Blackman was a bit of a reach, and Addison didn't blow me away, but he was a fine pick. Editor MillerFootball again. I just want to real quick change 2 of the grades here for the Vikings. They balance each other out. One guy's going up, one guy's going down, so it's not going to change the overall grade you're about to hear in a moment. But we're going to be dropping Jacqueline Roy to a B. The more I think about his motor, the more I think about his inconsistency, I just can't have him as a B+. Then Dwayne McBride, the more I think about the value of getting him in the 7th round, he's easily an A-. That was a really, really good pick by Minnesota at the end of the day. In the 7th round, you're usually taking flyers on guys, and Dwayne McBride, I think, is above taking a flyer on somebody. He's somebody that I soured on as the offseason went on, but I do like what McBride brings to the table, so I don't think a B+ really does him justice. So I think as a whole, I'm going to give the Vikings a B. Like I said, they would have went a couple different directions early on, but they really, really did well on day 3. So I think as a whole, this is definitely a B draft class. And finally, with my Chicago Bears, I'm really, really happy with what we did in the draft this year. Ryan Poles in his 2nd draft after trading down from number 1, I think absolutely knocked it out of the park. So let's go ahead and jump into it, starting out with pick 10, which we traded down again, went down 1 spot, and got a 4th round pick next year from the Eagles. And I know a lot of people are really upset with this decision to trade down and basically go out of our way to not draft Jalen Carter, but at the end of the day, Jalen Carter was passed on multiple times by teams who really could have used a defensive tackle. Seattle, Detroit, the Raiders, you could even push it and say like the Falcons, all teams that could have used Jalen Carter. Dude's the most talented player in this draft class, but the character concerns are clearly a lot worse than a lot of people are making them out to be, and the Bears have made it very, very apparent they have no interest, in taking on people with those type of issues. I don't know Jalen Carter personally, so I can't say whether or not he's a good dude or not, or, whether he's a high character guy or not. I don't know. But, the off the field stuff, and clearly he didn't interview well, so I get why the Bears passed on him. And getting Darnell Wright, who was my OT1 in this class, is a huge, huge get at 10. He doesn't quite have the upside of someone like Paris Johnson, who went a good bit earlier, but Darnell Wright's really freaking good now, and will continue to be really freaking good for a while. The Bears' right tackle going into this draft was Larry Borum, who sucks. All due respect to Larry, man, but he's not good. So going out and getting a guy who high floor, high ceiling tackle, super, super strong, moves pretty well for his size, good run defender, good pass blocker. He's going to be playing down from his college weight, actually, which should help with his athleticism. So, love the pick. That's an A for me. Easy A. And yeah, I can't say anything negative about the right pick. I was a huge fan. I went crazy over it on draft night. I'm still giddy thinking about it. Something the Bears really, really needed. And then we get to pick 53 in the second round with Gervon Dexter. And if you watched the draft live stream we did on Run the North, which is the podcast I do, you should definitely check that out. There will be a link in the description. You probably saw that I wasn't super, super happy with the pick in the moment.
Miller, what do you think?
Oh,
Let me have any. I've never heard this name.
And now the Chiefs traded with the Lions. Lions are trading back.
Miller, tell me what's up with this guy.
We took a defensive tackle who is always the last person off the ball and does not know how to fire out of a three-point stance. He just stands directly up. I really wanted Adetomiwa Adebawore, someone I would have taken as early as late day one. So passing on him definitely pissed me off. But after seeing Adebawore fall all the way to the fourth round, and then seeing Chicago trade back in the fourth round, showed me that not only did they not have any interest in him, but the NFL didn't like him nearly as much as I did, so it kind of made me feel a little bit better. And as for Dexter, going into the draft, I saw the upside, right? Freak athlete, huge dude, good run defender, makes plays when he actually fires off the ball correctly, which is really the issue, is his get off. Really, if he gets that figured out, Dexter has super, super high upside. And as of late, Dexter's been claiming that, his job at Florida was more to two-gap and kind of read and react to what the guard was doing. So that would kind of explain why he wasn't firing off the ball like he should, because he straight up looked like he didn't know how to. Not that he was slow, not that he wasn't good at it, he just didn't know how to. So if that's the case, if his coach was really telling him that, first of all, the coach at Florida is a moron, or the defensive coordinator at Florida. And then second of all, like I said, super, super high upside there. He said his freshman and sophomore year is more vindictive of what his get-off looks like, so we'll have to go back and look at that. But the Bears needed help in the trenches. Like I said, you pass on Jalen Carter. Getting another athletic freak in the second round is pretty, pretty good as a consolation prize. So I'm giving this a B+. The more I think about it, the more I've thought about it, rather, I really like Dexter. Then we get 3 picks later, the Bears actually traded back up to go ahead and draft Tyreek Stevenson out of Miami. And I love this pick. Absolutely love this pick. Probably the best press man corner in this class. High floor guy with a super high ceiling. Aggressive, not afraid to get dirty, willing to play the ball. He is the perfect complement to Jalen Johnson, who's your CB1. The Bears really needed a CB2. So you're going to have him and Jalen Johnson with Kyler Gordon as your nickel, and then obviously with Brisker and Eddie Jackson at safety. The Bears are building their own little no-fly zone, which is awesome. So I'm really, really happy with this pick as well. Really, really wanted a corner in Chicago. I was, almost advocating for a corner at 10 with Christian Gonzalez. But ending up with Stevenson in the second round, someone who I had a late first round grade on, and getting right is, fantastic as well. So definitely can't complain there. Tyreek Stevenson is getting an A from me. Then we move on to the first pick that I wasn't thrilled with, and I'm still not thrilled with. And that is Zach Pickens. He's a good pass rusher. I'll give him that. He's a really good penetrating 3 technique, both athletically and in terms of his build. He's very similar to DeForest Buckner, which is big because, Matt Eberflus loved DeForest Buckner in Indianapolis. He's looking for a 3 technique that can be similar. So, I get why Eberflus liked him, but me personally, if a defensive tackle can't play the run, it's not ideal. And in the words of Brett Coleman, Zach Pickens cannot anchor against the run to save his fucking life. Oh my god, he is so bad against the run. No anchor, just kind of gets uprooted instantly. It's not an effort thing, thankfully. So, who knows, maybe you can develop him into a run defender, but I'm not going to bank on that. So while he's an awesome penetrating 3 technique, I would like more out of a defensive tackle as a run defender. So I'm going to give this a B-. Definitely out of these day 1 and day 2 picks, the pick that I'm the least thrilled with. And then we move on to day 3, where I think Ryan Poles cooked. These first 2 picks especially were huge. Roschon Johnson, we traded back and landed him. And when I found out, my reaction was nothing short of your classic freak out that you see on draft night, right? You see fans absolutely go crazy when their team drafts one of their favorite players, and that was me with Roschon. Roschon was probably my favorite running back in this draft. It was between him and Tyjae Spears, who I also would have loved in Chicago. But I like Roschon's playing style a little bit more because not only is he good all around, he's a good pass catcher, good blocker, runs between the tackles well, can run to the outside, but he's got an old school feel to his game, and I love guys that are like that. Roschon is a great power runner with really good vision, runs between the tackles well and runs to the outside well, like I said. Sure, he doesn't have breakaway speed, but he has enough. He has good footwork, great pass blocker. He blocks like a damn fullback because he was asked to play fullback a little bit at Texas next to Bijan Robinson. And sure, he was playing in his shadow, but quite frankly, I don't care. You put Bijan on a different team where he's not playing second fiddle to the best running back prospect we've seen since Saquon Barkley, then, we're probably singing a much more positive tune. He's probably going on day 2 of the draft going a lot higher because the dude's just that freaking good. The only knocks you have against him is he's not super fast and he wasn't productive, right? College production is whatever. It doesn't make or break a prospect for me. And David Montgomery was my favorite player in the league for a little while there. So I don't care about a running back that's not super fast. And quite frankly, Roschon does everything David Montgomery did, but better. He's more physical, better vision, better pass catcher. Sure, he's not as good of a route runner, but in terms of just catching the football, he is better. This is a fantastic pick by Chicago. I'm definitely giving this an A, maybe even an A+, but I think we'll just stick with an A. And then we get to Tyler Scott, who, he's going to come in and be kind of the replacement for Velus Jones. He's somebody who's a 3-level separator. You can get freaky with and have him run on jet sweeps and pop passes and stuff. Super fast, has that sprinter speed. I'm pretty sure he ran a sub 4.4. Smart guy. He's a little bit smaller, but if you get him a free release, he's going to make the defense pay. So he's going to come in right away and be that wide receiver 4. Long-term could be the wide receiver 3 because we're not going to extend both Claypool and Mooney, and I would assume Mooney's probably the priority there. So yeah, I really like Tyler Scott. He's more similar to Mooney than Velus Jones, but in terms of the role he's going to play, I think it's a lot more similar to what they wanted Velus Jones to be. Not what they ended up making him into, but what they wanted him to be. So he's actually going to get good playing time and, be impactful for our offense. This is a B+ for me, I think is where we're going to go with this. Yeah, we're going to stick with B+. And then we get to Noah Sewell out of Oregon, who was probably my least favorite pick the Bears made, just because I wasn't super blown away by what I saw out of him on tape. I've said before, I think this linebacker class is really, really bad. And Sewell wasn't someone who stood out despite that. He's not really that athletic in terms of being able to get out and move. He's got good straight line speed, but his ability to change directions and his fluidity is bad. Not good in coverage. He's just kind of a downhill thumper, which, much love for. Again, I love an old school player, and that's what Sewell is. But it's tough because there were linebackers on the board that I liked better. Guys like Servakia Dennis. But I have seen rumors that maybe Sewell is like a developmental edge to the Bears. And if that's the case, then I like the pick more. He's got the ability to do that. He's got the strength and the ability to shed blocks to do that. So that could change the grade like long term, but as of right now, I'm giving this a C. Again, just not in love with what Sewell brings to the table. But, if they just want him to be a backup Sam linebacker, maybe come in on the goal line, then you know what? That's cool too. Then we get to Terrell Smith, and this grade might be a little biased because I didn't get to watch him before the draft, but I did watch him after, and I can't say with 100% certainty that my thoughts on him aren't influenced by him being drafted by Chicago. So it's tough to give him a grade, but I'm going to give him a B just because I see the vision with the size and the athleticism. Long guy, tall guy, really athletic, good developmental corner there in the 5th round. So, like I said, can't complain there. And then Travis Bell and Kendall Williamson, pretty much the same story. Didn't watch either of them before the draft, and if I'm being totally honest, what I've seen out of them is still pretty minimal. But, 7th round, 2 guys with high upside in terms of athleticism. Can't go wrong there. Going to give both of these picks a B as well. And also shout out to Bell for being the first player drafted ever out of Kennesaw State. It's pretty cool. But yeah, as a whole, like I said, really, really happy with what the Bears went out and did this year. I'm going to give this draft an A. I don't want to be too crazy or too biased and say it's an A+, but I could definitely make an argument for it. Like I said, I just really, really like what they did. They got Wright, Stevenson, Johnson, Scott, all guys that were like my guys going into the draft. And then Dexter grew on me pretty quickly. And then, Pickens and Sewell, they got to kind of prove me wrong. But as a whole, really, really happy with this year's draft. But anyways, that's going to do it for my first draft grades video here on YouTube. Definitely make sure to let me know in the comments down below what you think about my opinions here. Whether I was too nice for some picks, too harsh on some picks, whatever it may be, let me know. And also keep in mind, at the end of the day, I'm not a professional. I'm not an NFL GM, I'm not an NFL scout, but I do feel like I'm qualified to talk about these picks because I have done my research and whatnot. At the end of the day, I'm just a 20-year-old college student with no social life that spends all of his spare time watching films. So take my opinions as you will, but I'm definitely confident in my evaluations and whatnot. But, if one of these guys ends up being a stud because the scout saw something I didn't, then so be it. If you want to come back to this video here in 2-3 years and tell me that I'm a moron when Kendall Williamson wins his 3rd Defensive Player of the Year award, then, by all means. But for now, these are my thoughts on these prospects, and I hope you all enjoyed. Definitely be on the lookout for some more fun NFL content coming your way over the next few months. It's going to be a very, very eventful summer here on this channel, and you won't want to miss it. So definitely make sure to subscribe. We're pushing for 200 subscribers. We're making that slow ascent into competency and relevancy here on YouTube. But anyways, to everyone out there watching, I hope you all have a wonderful day, night, evening, afternoon, whatever time of day it is for it. I hope you enjoy it because you're all wonderful people and you deserve it.